Hello, my name is Bob King, and apparently these people think that I'm the king of sandwich, and I'm interested in hearing my story. So I guess I would have to say it all started when I was in the summer of after 10th grade. A friend of mine asked me if I would be willing to ride bikes with her and another girl to the Cape, where her parents were camping, and they didn't want the two girls riding bikes alone from Duxbury, but that if she could get a boy to ride along, they would agree to let her do it. So I said sure. So I got on my one-speed bike in Duxbury and rode all the way down Route 3A and walked our bikes over the Sagamore Bridge, got onto Route 1, which I now know is Main Street 130. And I always remembered that around the time I passed the Shawnee Kroll campground, something just sort of came over me, and I was just completely enchanted by this town. And I really didn't even know where I was. I was just following my friend Susan, whose parents were camping, come to find out at Peters Pond Campground. So, you know, we followed along, and we ultimately ended up stopping at Quail Hollow and got an apple or an orange or something, and we went across the street and sat under the trees at Wing School. And I always remembered that little farm stand. And so we got to the campground, and at the end of the weekend, we put the bikes on top of the camper and went home to Duxbury. And I really never much thought about Sandwich again, except that I do remember saying to my friends while we were taking water from the artesian well in Town Hall Square that this is exactly the kind of town I want to live in when I grow up. So fast forward, I don't know, it must have been when I was 25, 1982. I had graduated from college, and really all the experience that I had had in my working life was in restaurants. And so I went looking for a restaurant, and it was just kismet that a restaurant broker in Hyannis, who had shown me a few things in Hyannis, had said, now on your way off Cape, at the time I was living in Boston, he said, stop in Sandwich. There's this little place called Marshland, and the guy's lease is going to be up, and he really wants to get out of there and has to make a decision quickly. So I did. I stopped, and I thought, wow, this place I could really work with. This is cute. It's got its own parking. It's freestanding. It was unlike anything else I had been shown, and it was sort of in my price range, which was not very much money. I had $5,000 saved that I was going to use to go to Europe for the summer with, and then this opportunity presented itself. And yet I really didn't know where I was going to get the rest of the money that it took to buy it. And as you know, one thing after another works out. I oftentimes say, I think when you set an intention for something, the world sort of cooperates with you. So I went about looking for the rest of the money, and the owner financed some of it, and I had an aunt that lent me some money, and my brother lent me some money, and I was up and running. And on March 21st, 1982, I bought Marshland Restaurant. At the time that I bought it, it really didn't even have a printed menu. It was kind of odd. It was just regular townies would come in and just say what they wanted, and I don't even know how they established how much they paid for it. But we printed a menu, we hung plants, we took an old book of Audubon prints and cut them out and framed them, and sort of collaged the walls with them. We made special boards, and it wasn't long before people in town discovered that Marshland was a different place. Actually, I missed a little space in there. So I opened Marshland, and about 2 years later, well, maybe it was about three. Actually, it was probably about 3 or 4 years later. I started Sandwiches, which was a little sandwich shop at Russell's Corner, and it's still there. But I also learned the lesson of the difference between owning a business and owning a job. And while it was a good little business, it really did not afford me really any income once I paid everybody else to run it, because I was down at Marshland and sort of paying somebody else to run Sandwiches, and it just didn't do that volume of business that really enabled me to make it worth my while. And ultimately, I sold it to two brothers who did, they were the total payroll. They, I think, did a very good job with it, and they were able to make a living because they weren't having to pay employees. And so that was sort of my second business in town. That was another thing. I went looking for houses, and in those days, I was looking to spend about $50,000 on a house. It's hard to believe you could buy a house in Sandwich for $50,000 in I think it was, by this time it was like maybe 84. And Betsy Warren, a local realtor, took me out. We went and we looked at a lot of cottages, and I wasn't happy with anything. And she said to me at the end of the day, she said, well, if you had like your dream come true, what would you want for a house? And I said, oh, that's easy, Betsy. I would love an antique house in the village. And she said, well, let me take you over. There's one for sale. And we pulled into the driveway of the house that I live in now. And I just looked at her and said, don't do this to me, Betsy, because I knew I was going to love it. And it was really expensive. It was $82,000. So I sort of ate my heart out over it, and I figured, we had agreed that, well, probably maybe by the end of the summer I would, have saved a greater amount of money as a down payment, because that was part of the issue. In those days, you had to put 20% down, and I didn't quite have that. So after about a month, I'd heard that the house had sold, and I went running to Betsy and said, oh, don't tell me that house on Summer Street sold. And she said, no, it hasn't. She said, but you really want that house? And I said, yeah, I just don't have enough for a down payment yet. And she said, well, why don't we see if the owners will write you a second mortgage? And I thought, okay. And they did. So, and that worked out really well because I was able to pay that off much quicker than we had anticipated. So they were very pleased, and I was very pleased. And I had the house I always wanted, and I've lived there ever since. And never wanted for more or better or bigger. It's just exactly what I always wanted in a house. So that's where I continue to live today. At the time, believe it or not, there wasn't even a Dunkin' Donuts in town. And we were having a real issue in our dining room with people going on their way to work, stopping in to get a cup of coffee, and the waitresses were tied up with people, giving people coffees to go while there were people out at tables waiting to get waited on. And so I thought we could put a little takeout bakery and coffee shop on that side, in that side of the building, and it's there today. And so we did. We cut through the wall, and we installed ovens, and we made a little bakery. And in the day, we decided that, it was already a donut shop in town, and so we really focused on muffins. And it was incredible how many muffins we would sell. I mean, we would have somebody have someone come in the afternoon, and they would fill the bakery case with muffins. They would fill 2 rolling covered bakery racks with trays of muffins. And then in the morning, somebody would come in. We would open at 6 o'clock in the morning. Those would start to sell. And then somebody in the morning would start to replenish. And literally, I mean, we would sell hundreds of muffins. And in fact, I remember the Boston Globe said that our muffins were bodacious. So that worked out really well, and we did that. And then in 1992, the building that had been the first edition became available. The local bank, the Sandwich Cooperative Bank, was holding it, and it had been abandoned, and they were looking to get it off their balance sheet. And so we approached them about, what's going on with that building, and there were several people that were interested in it, and we were very lucky that we had a reputation in town and track record. And I think that it was a different time in a sense then. I think that who you were and what you did and what you had for a track record mattered in banking, and I'm not so sure that that's as big a part of the equation anymore. I think today it seems like it's all about what do you have for money, what's the dollars and cents of it, not as opposed to sort of your personal integrity or background or experience. In the meantime, my partner Tobin had come into the business, and he was running the bakery side of Marshland, and I was more on the dining room side. And so we thought, well, this is a great opportunity. Well, because we didn't own the real estate at Marshland, and we could own the real estate, and it was a much bigger restaurant serving lunch and dinner, and had a liquor license. So we went for it, and we opened what we called the Beehive Tavern in 1992. And then by 1994, we realized that owning 2 restaurants was just not good for our health. And so in 1994, we sold Marshland and focused just on the Beehive Tavern, and we had a great run there. And like I said, we were in the right place at the right time. With Marshland, the town was small, it was just poised to begin growing, and it did. So you know, and there wasn't a lot of other options then, so, you know, we did really well with Marshland. There were no Dunkin' Donuts. We had all that coffee to-go business as well. And the same thing was true with the Beehive. When we opened the Beehive, there really weren't, you know, there was no 99 on Cape Cod. There was no, there were very few, you know, even dinner restaurants in town or nearby. So that proved to be, you know, a lucky move for us. And we did that until 2004. And by 2004, we just really felt that we were sort of burned out. We had a, you know, we had a long run in the restaurant business, and we just thought it was time to take a break. So we ended up selling it, and we did very well, and thought we were ready to sort of simplify our lives and to maybe not be as busy and hectic. And then after a few years of that, we realized, well, we're not quite ready to live as simple a life as we thought we were. And it was around that time that I had been going to what was the Merchant Square Deli, and I just thought, wow, this space is got a lot of, you know, untapped potential. It had 2 beautiful outdoor patios with no furniture on them. It was an authentic post and beam building. It took a lot for us to build it out. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that the whole downstairs of Cafe Chu is where the prep kitchen is, and that's really where most of the work goes on. And the upstairs is really just where the folks are assembling the sandwiches and salads. But everything that's baked and prepped, and the salad dressings and the soups and all that stuff is being done downstairs, which is why you don't see me at Cafe Chu very much, because I'm stuck in the, I always jokingly say they lock me in the cellar, while Tobin is upstairs running the front of the house. So, and I think it was 2008, we made the commitment to buy what was the Merchant Square Deli, and it took us longer than we thought to get it renovated. And we opened, and it's, you know, done really well, and we're really happy with that. And it turned out to be, unfortunately, a lot more work than we had anticipated, but you know, I guess nothing worth doing ever comes easy, so you know, it's just been a good experience, and you know, it's something we enjoy, and I think we've, you know, been received very well, and gotten a lot of accolades, so, you know, that's, it's been a good investment, I guess. Yeah, well, Marshland was, I always say, is the classic, like the classic American diner. You know, and it still is. You know, I think it's a concept that, you know, can survive and continue to always be a concept that works in restaurants, because everybody's, you know, interested in that classic sort of diner style restaurant. So that was that. Sandwiches was different in that Doug Amidon, the sign maker, made us a really wonderful sign, and it enabled people to create a sandwich, which was something sort of new at the time. You could pick one of maybe 7 breads, what kind of filling you wanted, what kind of topping you wanted, what kind of spread you wanted to have put on it. So.
But that was new, right?
And it was a really kind of a new idea then. I mean, it's now today it's, you know, it's sort of more commonplace, but at the time that was, you know, sort of a new, fresh concept of, you know, start with the basics and create your own. And then
so the sign that you're talking about is the one inside.
It's actually still there, yeah. It's sort of covered up, but it had little plexiglass panels that had, like, you know, so there'd be like a section of breads, a section of fillings, a section of toppings, a section for spreads, we called them, and I think it's a section for cheeses. And the lettering was all put on plexiglass panels, so that if you ran out of something, you could just take that panel down, or if you wanted to add something, you could add a panel in. And it was very attractive. Well, you know, I have never taken credit for sort of inventing the wheel. I pay attention. I think, you know, if you're plugged, I guess I'm a foodie. You know, I just read a lot about food. I have magazines. I eat out a lot. I pay attention. That's my interest. So I think that also, in a way, that's why Cafe Chu is popular, because I think we have offerings that are unusual or more creative we're lucky to have Pan d'Avignon as a bakery to get great artisan breads. So with sandwiches, that was unique. That was, wasn't like going into, a sub shop where you picked the Italian or you picked the tuna or whatever. It was, you really did have the opportunity to create your own sandwich on, exactly how you wanted it. And then the Beehive was, a completely different animal because it was much more, rather than sort of what I would call diner style food, it went into really full dinners, and we did baked seafood, we did fried seafood, we had broiled steaks and chops, and we had to do a vegetable of the day, and a mashed potatoes and baked potatoes and rice pilaf and chowder and soups, and we still made all our own salad dressings. And it was, when I think back, I was so lucky to have the staff that I did, because virtually all of them stuck with me for the whole 14 years that we were there. Because when we left there and then we went to open Cafe Chu, we thought, well, this is going to be a piece of cake, because it's going to be just like the cold station at the Beehive. Compared to the Beehive Tavern, all we're going to have to do is make soup and salads and sandwiches. It's like the cold station. This is going to be a piece of cake. And in the summertime, it takes 4 of us constantly pounding out the prep work to just keep up with the volume of food that's being sold out of that place. So it's actually turned out to be a lot more work than we had anticipated. So we went along with just the Beehive, and it was, plenty of work, that's for sure, and it was very, very busy. And like I said, after like 14 years of it, we thought, I think we're ready for, a change. I ended up managing the Outer Bar and Grill at the Wachusett Resort, and after 3 or 4 seasons of that, together with, and I would just work summers, we just sort of felt like, well, I kind of felt at any rate that I was giving my mojo away. That, why am I working so hard for somebody else if I'm gonna, because I really, to be honest, worked harder for the resort than I think I had for myself. And it was very demanding and very, very high-end, very exclusive. People spent a lot of money to stay there and had very high expectations, and which was great. I learned an awful lot about customer service and meeting those needs. But I also felt like, well, if I'm going to do this, I should be doing it for myself. And that was the other reason we sort of went seeking another place. And ask and ye shall receive. And sure enough, the space that's now Cafe Chu came along, and so we jumped at it, and it's all turned out to be good. The popularity of Cafe Chu has definitely, we actually will have, for the first time, I think, since Merchant Square was built, I think our section will have 100% occupancy. The people who have retail stores there have said that, the fact that all of these people come to Cafe Chu will then be curious. Well, let's see, what's Wish Gift Company? What is, Summer Cottage? What is Sundance? Now I'm hoping that they will also say, what is Splash? And I think it's important to work with other businesses like that. I will definitely promote Splash when they open, so that people will know that that they're there, and that that doesn't mean it doesn't work in the opposite either. That there aren't people who will be specifically going to Splash who might say, well, since we're here, let's have lunch at Cafe Chu. So it's a very symbiotic thing, and I think that you want to sort of work together as a group in a situation like that. Cafe Chu's popularity has definitely brought Merchant Square to life. People will oftentimes say, well, what is the formula for a successful restaurant? And I think there's 3 things that a successful restaurant, if they have all 3 of them, will definitely be successful. And one is a good location. People have to be able to find you easily. That's helpful. It's not always absolutely, completely necessary, because if, on the other hand, you also have good food, is the second component that I think is an absolute necessity, over even a better location. And the third thing is atmosphere. So if you have a building or a space that's interesting and atmospheric, and it has great food, and it has a good location, then it's kind of hard to lose. And I think, personally, our success in the restaurant business is based a lot on the idea that we make so much from scratch that, you know, if we can make it ourselves, usually you can make it better if you make it yourself. We do. All the baked goods at Cafe Chu are made from scratch. They're made with butter rather than shortening. They're made with good quality chocolate when you know, that's the case that chocolate's being used. The difference comes through, you know, whether it's that person being conscious of it or not. They just know it tastes good. But I'm saying the reason I think it tastes good is because it's homemade and it's from scratch, and it's maybe even, you know, better quality than what you generally than what you can buy pre-made. You know, when I make a tray of 96 brownies, I would bet that they probably have close to 15 pounds of chocolate in it. And, you know, I think it's a huge difference between a piece of brown cake, it's called a brownie, and this really, you know, ultimate, you know, honestly, to die for brownie that we make. And those are the little, I think, the differences that, you know, set you apart. And, you know, but it's a lot of work and it's a lot of effort, and I think it's oftentimes more work and effort than a lot of people want to put in. And maybe that's why, you know, we do well, because we do put in that work and that effort. Of course, at the time it was stressful and it was a lot of work, but, you know, in retrospect, you know, I think it was also a lot of fun, and I just, you know, I marvel. I mean, there were times I can remember literally like having to take people from like the middle of the restaurant over to a side dining room, and the bar between us being so full of people that I would have to take them through the kitchen to get to the side dining room because we just couldn't push our way through the bar. So it was sad in a sense, you know, because it was so popular and it was so busy, and you know, I don't want to be critical, but you know, I think some of that formula that made us successful was changed, and as a result, you know, the business just kind of dwindled off. The story of our coffee is funny. We were at Joe's in Provincetown. We were at Bank Street Coffee in Harwich. We were at the Underground Cafe in Dennis, and we were at Bucky's in Dennisport. And in each time, being coffee fiends, we noticed that the coffee was really good in all 4 of those places, and asked, hey, where did you get your coffee? And all of them said Indigo Coffee in Northampton. So when we opened, we knew that's where we're going to go. And, you know, wonderful woman. She, you know, she worked up formulas for our coffees that, you know, with a blend that I think is really good. I think it's the best coffee in town. You know, no brag, just fact. I think that, you know, it's, you know, you just try to do what you think is the best, and things work out. We kind of knew when we opened that, given that our background and the fact that we had had restaurants in the past, that we could get people in based on our reputation, but that's not going to get them back. You know, if after they come in, it's not a good experience, that doesn't guarantee the fact that they're ever going to come back again. So, you know, we were lucky that we had that reputation in terms of getting people initially to come in, but like I said, that doesn't always get them to come back. And, you know, I'm grateful for that. I'll tell you, it's incredible how many people will come in from other towns and say, oh, and I think this is probably true, that a Cafe Chu would work so well in our town. Why don't you come to Hingham? Why don't you come to Duxbury? Why don't you come to Plymouth or come to Marshfield? Or, you know, people from all over the place will say that oftentimes, like, oh, I think this concept will work well. And, you know, I don't know. Sandwich is my home. You know, I love Sandwich. I love living here. I think it's a beautiful place. Even after living here all this time, I mean, what is it, almost 35 years, on a daily basis, I'm still blown away by something, the beauty of something. Today it was looking over Sham Pond as I crossed the bandstand, and the snow and the ice and the sun and the way it hit, and it was like stunning. Or I'll be driving home from Cafe Chu and I'll look out and the tide will be high and the marsh will be full and you can see the boardwalk and the dunes, and it's just beautiful. I really do have a strong belief in the idea that, you know, when you set an intention for something, or you have a dream or an idea for something, and you want it to happen, and you really put it out there, that it does. And so in each instance, it wasn't that, you know, I knew that this is going to happen, but I wished and hoped for it, I guess, and kept my eyes and my ears open, and something presents itself, and you say, hey, that's, I think, what I've been looking for, or what I've been thinking about. I love Sandwich. I think it's a great town. I know a lot of people here, and my life is kind of, to be honest with you, just sort of come true in the terms of how I always hoped or dreamed it would. You know, I ended up with the house I always wanted and never wanted for more. The businesses have always been good and thrived and provided me with a good living, and I've made great friends here and wonderful acquaintances, and you know, like the old lady in Grey Gardens, you know, Big Edie says about her, you know, living in her house, the only way I'm leaving is feet first. Great partnership and marriage, and yeah, everything's sort of worked out. I have no complaints.